Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 333 of the AwardsWatch Podcast. Today we are out on the wily, windy moors. Yes, we are talking all about Wuthering Heights. I'm your host today, Sophia Ciminello. I cannot be alone for this. This is going to be a very fun episode, and we have a huge crew here today to break it all down. First, we have Erik Anderson.
Hello, hello. Time to break a few eggs.
Ryan McQuade.
God damn it, he just stole my intro. God damn. Hello, everyone.
I knew one of you would do it.
Yeah.
Dan Baer.
Do you want me to stop?
And
Whoa.
Josh Parham.
I am ready for my corset to be pulled.
Whoa.
Wow. Starting
The
off
unexpected
strong today.
bondage.
Yeah.
Well, I just saw Pillion not too long ago, so.
Heyo.
You know, that's a good double feature, I think, this Valentine's
It
Day
truly
weekend.
is.
Yeah.
This is a Valentine's Day for the freaks.
It is. Whips, horse bits, chains, all of it.
Leather.
Corsets, everything.
Skin
So-
rooms.
Walls.
Skin rooms, leeches, all sorts of good stuff. Eggs, slugs. This
Dough.
movie is gross.
Hangings.
Yeah. Blood. This movie it's really in the muck here. So we'll have a lot to talk about. Wuthering Heights. So we're going to talk about that first, and then we will get into a BAFTA preview later in the episode. New movies are coming out, yes, but of course we are also in the thick of award season, and we'll want to preview these awards, which will be next weekend, February 22nd. But Wuthering Heights, we'll just start there. So in quotations, that's how Emerald Fennell, our director, has stylized this title. It's directed by Fennell, who is a filmmaker who I think we can call a kind of modern provocateur, especially after her first two features. She, of course, won an Oscar for original screenplay for Promising Young Woman, a movie that people are very normal about, as well as Saltburn, another film that people are very normal about. Wuthering Heights, though, is based specifically around her experience that she had when she was 14, when she read Emily Bronte's classic 1847 novel. Her version is framed as a love story, and it's specifically billed as, quote, inspired by the greatest love story of all time. The poster looks like something out of Gone with the Wind or Titanic, these big, classic, sweeping romances. But for book readers, that is, of course, I think, up for debate. But this is, after all, based on Fennell's experience, and it is her version of the story. I'm excited to talk about that and how you all feel about that and what you think that means. This, of course, stars Margot Robbie, who is also a producer on the film, Jacob Elordi, Alison Oliver, Shazad Latif, and Hong Chau. We'll also talk about the crafts here and all the collaborators, but we also have an original soundtrack by the great Charlie XCX, which is a bit anachronistic, and I can't wait to share more thoughts on that piece. But Wuthering Heights here begins at Wuthering Heights, of course, where we follow a young Kathy Earnshaw. Soon her father, a violent drunk, brings home a young boy who Kathy christens Heathcliff. The two play together, traverse the foggy Yorkshire moors, and end up falling in love, very innocently, of course. But as they grow older, things, of course, become more complicated, as they often do. And they have very different roles at Wuthering Heights. Heathcliff is a servant, and Kathy is trying to catch the eye of Edgar Linton and his ward Isabella. They're a very wealthy pair who has just moved in across the way at Thrushcross Grange. One day, when she's spying on them, Kathy falls over the garden wall, sprains her ankle, and the Lintons take her in under their care and teach her how to be a lady. She soon returns to the Heights, Edgar proposes, and things get even more tricky, especially as Heathcliff overhears how Kathy feels about him, but only partially, and decides to flee for a number of years before he gets a glow up, gets rich, and comes back. It's worth noting that, like many filmmakers, including, of course, William Wyler with his 1939 version, that Emerald Fennell chooses to really only tackle the first part of the book. So if you're familiar with the book, There's an extended section that happens after this film ends. Most filmmakers do tend to stay away from that. It gets a little bit more complex in that second half, but I have to say, I would have been curious to see what she would have done with that, as it's very, very different from what she decides to do here. But of course, we'll get into the book and the film and how that works. But I think just to start out, let's go through just our general reactions and your initial thoughts on Wuthering Heights. And I think too, if you could just say how you feel about Fennell as a filmmaker and maybe how that influenced your viewing of this.
Yeah, so Emerald Fennell, I am fascinated with as a filmmaker. I do admire her dedication to just be provocative at any opportunity. And, I don't think that always results in good movies. Like, I did like Promising Young Woman. It was flawed, but it had some things I appreciated about it. I did not like Saltburn. That was, to me, the meme of the woman in the grocery store with the frozen food on her head. She's so crazy. Look at her. Like, that was my feeling about that whole movie. Hated it. Found it to be annoying. But I still think that she is interesting at the very least. And when I heard that she was doing this movie, I was intrigued by it. Maybe not excited, but I was definitely intrigued as to what those results would be. And I think ultimately this film has things in it that I do find to be pretty compelling. Like, I do think for the craft of it, it is garish in a lot of ways, but I think kind of pointedly so in some aspects. I do find that to be very captivating. I like some of these performances for sure, but ultimately the movie just feels like it is not nailed down with its tone. And there are times when it feels like it wants to take its emotions and this romance very seriously and earnestly, but then other times it's like trying to be almost the paperback romance novel version of this story, which I think could be a fascinating way to go. But if you're going to do it, I need like 100% commitment to this wild, outlandish tone. And I don't think it fully does that. And because of that, I end up getting very frustrated with the ultimate storytelling. And truthfully, I found the romance at the center to be pretty flat and not very engaging to me. So it's not a terrible movie. I liked it a little bit more than Saltburn, but still is one that does style over substance, but not in a way that I found to be that interesting either.
Yeah, it's funny you said that about the paperback romance, because when I was in London last week, I was at a bookstore and they had this whole just showcase of Wuthering Heights, different versions of the book, different editions, and they of course have a paperback that Penguin Classics has newly printed with the movie poster on it with Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie. And it got me thinking, I think, about my initial reactions to the trailer, which is this feels like she's trying to create this Gothic novel that you would have seen in like the 70s, those like mass market paperbacks with the highly stylized covers. And I agree with you. I just don't think it totally goes there. Dan, what did you think of Wuthering Heights?
It's very convenient that I'm going after Josh because I can just say a lot of, yeah, what Josh said. That. I think Emerald Fennell, I am admittedly a style over substance guy when it comes to movies. And I think that her style in particular has a lot of flair to it. It's a lot of very bold choices in the design and overall look of her films. And I think I do appreciate her as a visual artist, I think, more than as a storyteller sometimes. I did really enjoy Promising Young Woman. I thought it was a lot of fun and had, interesting things to say. Whether or not I agreed with them was very different, but I liked the conversations that movie started. And Saltburn is just the sickos meme, just like me looking into the window going, yes. I loved how uncomfortable that movie made people and watching how uncomfortable it made them. And because honestly, like, come on, like, I think as a gay man, it's like, oh, this is such weak sauce. Oh, you straight people are so easily scared and flustered by these things. But like, at the same time, it's a lot of fun watching someone really like poke the audience going like, what do you think about this? Even if some of those things are kind of like a little empty provocation sometimes, it's still fun. And I don't think there are a lot of filmmakers that are doing that at this kind of big, broad level that she's
Mhm.
working at. And I think that is a lot of fun. And we need filmmakers like that, whether or not they're always successful. And this movie is, I think, pretty easily my least favorite of hers so far. But I think that's not that I didn't like it. I think it contains the ridiculous and the sublime in pretty much equal measure. There are some things that I really impressed. I think the opening gambit with the sounds over the black screen, and then the reveal of what it's coming from is peak Emerald Fennell. Whether or not you like that or dislike that is up to you, but I think it is very much in tone with what she likes to do. And I loved that the ballsiness of that opening. But as it goes on, I just found the pacing of this thing just kept dragging and dragging as it went on. And in the beginning, especially with the younger versions of Kathy and Heathcliff, I was really engaged and I was kind of impressed with how true she stayed to the cruelty of these characters from the book in a thing that is obviously like from a major studio and going for a pretty broad audience base. This gets pretty nasty, and not quite as nasty as the book gets, but a lot of that is saved for like the part that she chose not to adapt. So there's that. And I think the changes that she makes to the novel are very much a mixed bag. Some of them I really appreciated, some of them I did not. And we will get into those, I am sure, later on. But all that said, I did love the kind of tacky, wacky design choices she and the costume and production designers made on this film. And even in the terms of the lighting from Linus Engren's cinematography, it's just like some of this is like, gorgeous. And then other is like a little eye rolly, like, okay, like the Gone with the Wind background against it, like, we get it. Okay, like
Mhm.
move on, please. But at the end of the day, I did enjoy this, and I think that comes down to a lot of the performances, not necessarily the two leads, although I think they are good. But the supporting cast, I think, is impeccable, especially Alison Oliver, who is
Mhm.
God, the Isabella Linton of my dreams. I did not even realize. Like, oh my God, perfect. And I think Hong Chau, they use her sphinx-like face very smartly. And I thought that as much as I think a lot of what Emerald Fennell ultimately has to say about the many themes that the book is working with ultimately is somewhat surface level, I appreciate how much, while still focusing on the romance that you naturally, I think, uh, cotton to as a young woman, I was impressed that she was able to give a sort of nod to a lot of these other themes that literary scholars have been debating literally since this book was published. And do I wish that she had delved a little deeper? Yes. Am I glad that she did say, yes, this is an issue with this text that we cannot explore fully in a 2-hour romance? I wish she could have done more. But
Yeah.
I don't necessarily hold that against her because I don't think anyone is looking for a 3-hour version of Wuthering Heights that doesn't include the second half of the book. But yeah, I think ultimately, I think just I wanted and expected more from this.
Yeah. That's a common thing I think I've been hearing, and I feel too. I think too the point about Nellie and Isabella Linton here, I think she makes some choices with them that just do not work on a script level, but the performances from both of them, like they are fully leaning into it, and I think doing something that feels very different from what you would
Mhm.
expect from those characters. Erik, I know you, I think, are the biggest fan of Emerald Fennell's work on this pod today in this group. So I'm curious how you think Wuthering Heights really stacks up compared to her other films and yeah, what you thought of it overall.
Yes, I am absolutely Fennell pilled both as a filmmaker and an actress. I think she is incredible in The Crown. I would actually like to see her go back in front of the camera sometime soon because I think she's pretty fantastic. I think Promising Young Woman and Saltburn are both like absolute, just flat out masterpieces. I think they they are provocative in the way that I was really hoping that this would be. But I think what happened is she basically already did so much of Wuthering Heights in Saltburn and covered a whole lot of that ground that by the time she got to actually doing Wuthering Heights, it feels like she had to pull back on so many things because otherwise it would have just been like retreaded territory. And in your review, you mentioned both, Sophia Coppola and Baz Luhrmann, specifically, Romeo and Juliet and Marie Antoinette, as stylistic movies that use, maximalism or anachronism as a really great gateway to storytelling. And they both do in very different ways. And I think what happens here is I think Fennell is so stuck like right in the middle of both of them because she wants, the modern soundtrack and the Converse shoes, and she wants a little bit of the real extreme craziness of Romeo and Juliet, but she doesn't really know when to do one, when to do the other. And by the end of her version of this, it's kind of all abandoned and it just becomes a very straightforward traditional period piece, which honestly it's the biggest crime I think you can make as a director like Emerald Fennell, because Saltburn and Promising Young Woman both had incredible endings, absolutely killer endings. And this was just flat. And it's too bad because I loved the changes from the book. I loved them for how problematic they were because it makes you really uncomfortable. And then it also kind of makes conversations really funny to listen to why people, have a difficulty with Jacob Elordi's casting, which to me, I think a lot of people that were doing that cherry picking of the text to say, well, no, he's always been a person of color. It's not unlike when Christians cherry pick little sections of the Bible that work in favor of the narrative that they need to, but you're then not looking at the very next psalm after that to give any context. But that aside, I thought everybody was really good. I loved the aging up of the characters going from, teenagers, which is very, Romeo and Juliet, to, being a spinster at 30 years old. That's an entirely different conversation and a different way to approach this story, which I thought was really, really good, especially with her rotting father, who was also really, really good. He was fantastic. But yeah, I mean, stylistically, I loved the costuming. I loved the production design. I do wish like most of the movie, she had really gone all the way with the Gone with the Wind, the paperback torrid novel style, because when it's in that mode, or even, the music video montage, which is great, because I was like, oh my God, we saw something for 1 second that I wish we had seen a whole scene of. When it's in that mode, I think it's exactly the energy that this story kind of needed the whole time.
I agree. And you're right. I mentioned Marie Antoinette and Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet in my review. Another film that I've been thinking a lot about It's actually another Coppola film, but not Sophia. It's Coppola's Dracula, which I think is just an expert adaptation that is not really that close to the source material and takes a lot of liberties, but is so completely committed to the tone that it just works. Like he never pulls back or second guesses himself, and we are just in that. Whether you like Keanu's performance or not, whether you like the camp or not, those costumes are some of the best you've ever seen. That to me, I think was also what I was hoping for here. Like that film too has many detractors who are purists and who don't have fun with that because of their own issues with the script, but at least it's committing and not second guessing, right? And I think that is what's happening a lot here. But Ryan, what did you think of it and how do you feel about it? I think in conversation with Fennell's previous two films.
Well, this is such a difficult film, I think, to talk about because I'm in the middle when it comes to Emerald Fennell. I think Promising Young Woman is not the film that Dan and Eric think. I think it completely falls apart in the third act, and when you start picking it apart, its messaging, its ending, and everything is completely antithetical to everything that's going on in that film, and crumbles within itself, and it becomes a exercise of empty calories. And then we all saw Saltburn together, Sophia and Eric and I, at the premiere at Telluride. And I know that movie has problems, but I don't give a shit. Like, I think that movie is so much fun. And again, logically, by the end, some of it doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, I don't care. She's going for it. It's what I wanted by the end. And it just goes full crazy. And she's very confident. And visually, she's even more confident in that film than she is in her debut. And there is also a massive critique of her own self and the world that she grew up in. And I think is there. Her ideas of obsession, longing are very apparent in that film. I think everything about that movie is far superior to her debut. And I was at the Middleburg Film Festival shortly after, and she was at a conversation with Jazz Pancake of Variety. And I went up to her and we were talking a little bit, and I said, I think the next thing that I told her, I was like, I think the next thing you should do is tackle something like marriage. And she gave me this smile, of like, oh, don't you worry, it's gonna happen. And then we got the news that this is coming out, and little inside baseball. This house was a very dark place because my wife, as like many people, it's one of her favorite novels. It's her favorite novel. And there is this sacredness, like you mentioned, Eric and Sophia, about this text. It's a very beloved book. And I think that the problem is there's never been truly a from cover to cover great adaptation of this thing. I think that there's very admired and very respected versions of this, but I don't think there is a 100% definitive take on this thing. And it kind of bugs a lot of people, but it's also very funny that Bram Stoker's Dracula is mentioned because that is my wife's favorite version of Dracula. And she is a big defender of the differences in the adaptation there. It's been massively interesting conversations, though she has told me she will not see this film because she just, for some reason, the style of this version does seem to be Timu Sofia Coppola. In a lot of ways, it feels to be like the knockoff version of Marie Antoinette, and we kind of called that a little bit ahead of time, Sophia. But then it's one thing to like see that in the trailer and how that's marketed. It's another thing to watch the film. I just think the movie's kind of boring. Like the more I've stepped away from it, it's just boring. It's tame in comparison to even Promising Young Woman, definitely Saltburn. It's a tame film. It's marketed as this sex driven machine, and then you go in there and it barely has any of that. It is as tame as possible, and that is to subvert expectations as well. But audiences aren't going in there for that. They are going in there for these two ripping each other's clothes off in the moors. You know what I mean? And I don't think that that's what it is, and I do think that it does feel as if Emerald Fennell is living out her 14-year-old self fantasy. That's not a good thing. Sometimes that can be good for others because they have a vision that they want to see from when they were 14, and it's concrete and distinct and it has something to say. I don't think that this version has really much to say other than she saw Jacob Elordi like most of us in Saltburn and was like, what if he's Heathcliff? What if I could fuck him? Because there are moments in this movie where you see Margot Robbie's casting, and from a side angle of whatnot, or behind shot or whatever, it looks exactly like Emerald Fennell. And you're like, okay, so you got your producing partner and one of your friends to basically play you to fuck this guy. Really cool, fascinating. That doesn't really say much, though, about the original text and the characters. It says a lot about you and what you want to do, which, I mean, you should probably have that conversation with your husband and your actors and, maybe get SAG involved. You know what I mean? Who knows what the case may be. But the point is that that's not Wuthering Heights. And that's not actually really interesting. It's really flaccid in a lot of ways in terms of trying to depict this very rich and very concrete and interesting novel. And yes, I do think I'm with Erik. I like Jacob Elordi a lot in this film. Actually, I was watching this film and I was thinking, between this and Frankenstein, this is a movie star. And regardless of if he should be cast in there, it's a separate conversation that he is cast in this, and he's fantastic in this. There's a moment where, and it's in the trailer, where he grabs her sort of corset and pulls her up. Guys, if none of us had filled nothing in that moment, then that's a lot about you, because I was like, holy shit. And when I was in a room full of critics, and I've seen movies with these critics, and there's no reaction, everybody had a reaction in that moment. So clearly it was effective, to say the least.
I let out a little yelp.
Yeah,
you're
like,
whoa.
Yelp. There's a couple of moments and a couple of shots, and I do think that when it does get to some of the more deranged bits towards the end of the film, his obsession and his anger, I actually wish it kept going, because I think he delivers it fantastic. I think Alison Oliver's great. Those are the two standouts for me. I think Margot Robbie is completely miscast. I think the age up is terrible. I think she looks poor at times. I don't think the cinematography, the makeup, the costumes, the way Fennell takes some of the takes, don't think they really work for her. It does feel very, local theater company for her in some ways. Like, I got to put this production on, and I got the money, so therefore I get to be in this part. But it kind of feels like we've been leading up to Margot Robbie playing a lead in an Emerald Fennell film since she first produced Promising Young Woman and Saltburn. It just is a shame that it's this. Hong Chau's in this film. I think she's pretty inconsistent at times as Nellie. And then just all the things that are taken out of the book. I think that there's tons of characters, plots, the ending, second half, you name it. And then the costume designs are weird. The production design's pretty good. The cinematography is inconsistent. It's kind of as if it was a perfect summation of my first two experiences with Emerald Fennell, where you have great provocative things on one hand and a couple of good performances, and then you have sort of all the messy bits that she can't help herself or refuses to get a co-writer to help her out with this. And so it leads it to be this very mixed and uneven experience that the more I step away from it, the more I think is a massive step back again for her overall.
Yeah, I told you all as a group before we started recording that the last time I talked about Wuthering Heights with a group was when I was teaching it. So I love this book. I am very well versed in Brontë and in Wuthering Heights as a text, but to start, I don't really care about how faithful an adaptation is. My favorite movie of last year was One Battle After Another, which I read Vineland before I saw that movie, and it is very different. But I think what disappointed me here about her take on Wuthering Heights is that, Erik, it's what you said, and it's what I said in my review. I think when it was announced that she was doing Wuthering Heights, I thought, actually, I'm going to defend her a little bit on this, because this is right in her wheelhouse. She loves Gothic storytelling. We've had a little graveside necrophilia before. She likes when an outsider comes in and tries to usurp those in power. And she likes revenge. She likes violence. She likes things that are grimy and wrong. And the coolest thing I think about Wuthering Heights is that when it came out, it was such a rejection of those types of stories that audiences at the time were familiar with, and it shocked people and it scared them. And people talked about just how, like, how can this be? How can this book be something that readers are dealing with? And so with that, I thought, okay, she's a button pusher. She likes getting in there and she likes making people angry and she likes telling a story that's completely her own that sure has its flaws. I made a joke earlier this week that Fennell films are like the Catholic Church, unmatched aesthetics, but when you look under the hood, there are a lot of issues. And I think here, what we have is someone who used up all of the Wuthering Heights bits that she really loved, all of the darkness and what I think scholars debate about the book. She used that up in Saltburn. Whether you like that film or not, that is more Wuthering Heights than Wuthering Heights. And then the cynical part of my brain takes over, and I think, this just feels like IP. It just feels like you are putting Wuthering Heights on a poster. You're using the names Heathcliff and Kathy with one of the hottest men alive and in movies right now as Heathcliff, and a movie star who was also Barbie and is your producer in those two parts. And now that book talk is also this huge thing, and people are reading ACOTAR and all of these kind of romantasy novels, it just feels like something that is catering to that audience, to the Bridgerton types too. And it's just not Brontë at its core. So I think that was also what was frustrating, is that I actually feel like if she would have, stayed a little bit closer to the book, it would have felt like a core Fennell film. Because in a way, I think what she was interested in this book, it aligns so well with the things that Fennell wants to do as a filmmaker. So it just felt like a missed opportunity to me. And I actually think that the conversation around the casting is very interesting because, scholars have debated for a long time about Heathcliff's race. And I think the important bit too is that it's ambiguous. And I like the ambiguity that exists in the book. And I think that's really difficult actually to translate physical ambiguity to an on-screen character. But at the same time, Heathcliff is an other character. And here in this film, he's really not. Like, you never get the feeling when you're watching him that everybody hates this man for no reason or something that's totally beyond his control. Even when he's covered in dirt and has the long, scraggly hair, there's still something compelling about him that doesn't necessarily make him feel like an outsider other than class, which she loosely touches here. But this is not a director who loves theme. I'll say that. Like, she's not really into theme. She wants to show you things, but I don't think she really wants to dig a bit deeper into that.
Yeah, what is the Benioff and Weiss quote about Game of Thrones? Themes are for eighth grade book reports. Yeah, that's kind of feels like maybe her stance. And yeah, I think that with Heathcliff as a character too in this version, that was one of my other big frustrations, is that I just don't think there's anything to define him at all in this movie. Like, you get the outline of why he is resentful and why they would be pushing away from him. And like, class, especially in England, like, is a very big thing. So I understand that as a decent foundation, but building from that, it's like nothing. He returns and he's rich and well off now, and they don't do anything, not to just like vaguely talk about it. They don't talk about it at all. It's like, what has happened? Like, who are you as a character right now that motivates you both within this revenge narrative and within your romance? And not having any of that, like, I don't care how hot both of them are. If there's nothing emotionally that I'm connecting to, then the whole core of your narrative about this romance for me to care about does not work at all for me.
Yeah, to me, like, because I just reread the book before watching it, and one of the reasons I was so excited to see Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff is because I've heard Emerald Fennell compare him to Daniel Day-Lewis before. And to me, Heathcliff is almost like if Daniel Plainview fell in love. It is someone who is like completely wicked and evil and just obsessed with hurting everyone around him and revenge. And he feels like a devil. Like there is an outsider, otherworldly quality to this person that feels like they were dropped in from hell to punish everyone around them. And that is just not what you get from Jacob Elordi here as Heathcliff at all. And I don't think it's a performance issue from him either. It's the writing.
There's a gap between there that Elordi has to fill all on his own. So when he does go full evil, it feels actually pretty unnatural
Yeah.
and unwarranted and schizophrenic. Like, you know that it's supposed to happen, but the path to get there never makes sense because it isn't filled in, and it really needs that. I know most people's issues with Fennell are screenplay related, and this is certainly a situation where I would agree with that, because the pieces are there. The big missing one is that screenplay that doesn't live up to the promise of the changes that are made. Whether it's Linton and Isabella, their relationship is not the same, and I don't know how much it benefits by changing it as much as she did. Although I will also echo, Alison Oliver is incredible in this, and I've certainly seen a whole lot the last couple of days online about what happens to Isabella and how that character was changed from the book to the film. And honestly, I kind of have to laugh at most of them because it just is some pretty embarrassing commentary, because I think what happens is pretty fantastic. And I would fear any of those people to watch Pillion, because those two movies are very well aligned in a certain part of Wuthering Heights, in allowing people's free will to make decisions that maybe to you feel gross or weird or uncomfortable. But if a person is making the choice to do that, I don't know, sort of, who the fuck are you to judge that?
I think there's a tension in this movie, and I think it could have been played a lot more interestingly between the version of Wuthering Heights that Emerald Fennell saw in her head when she was 13 or 14 and reading this book, and the version that she sees now as an older woman looking back with the wisdom that she has gained. And I think that it is most present and most interesting and most provocative in that scene with Isabella and Heathcliff, where he keeps saying, I am going to be the worst husband to you ever. Do you want me to stop? And she cannot do anything but say yes. And that whole thing feels very pointed about these kinds of men and their hold on women, particularly younger, impressionable, more isolated women who haven't had a lot of experience, who, let's be honest, that's most teenage girls when they first read Wuthering Heights. And yeah, I think that is such a smart scene to put in this movie in that way. But it is the only part of the movie that is really engaging with that tension. And most of the time, other times, it just comes across as this kind of half-assed, but he's so hot and pretty and he loves her. And that's just not enough to make up for how cruel all of these characters are to each other.
No, I totally agree with what Dan's saying. I mean, it feels as if like she didn't reread the book before, Sophia, you've read the book again before she did, before she even made the film. It feels as
and
if
before Margot did.
Exactly. Like Margot, didn't hearing how they researched this. You're just like, Jesus Christ, what are you people doing? Like it's kind of important to do that. And yeah, I mean, Erik mentioned it earlier about Fennell isn't the strongest writer. Jay and I have talked about this before when we've discussed her, is that, she has such a visual eye. She's so confident, really. By film 3, she's very confident in what she wants the visual of an audience to see with her work. And I think that goes a lot with like the egg imagery or the skin room or just the different shots in the film. Like, there are lasting images in this thing for sure. But then when you get to dissecting them and pulling it apart, is once again where she loses and divides audiences. It's okay to admit like she needs somebody to help her write these things, because there's so many ideas, I think, that are bubbling from her mind, bubbling from this source text, that there has to be this marriage, this sick marriage, as Dan is kind of talking about there, that kind of melds throughout the entirety of it. I mean, you're beginning with this hanging, and it's exactly how it was described when everybody online freaked out, by the way, too, about this hanging and someone has an erection and Kathy's seeing it and everything. And you're like, cool, this should be like the movie. Like, this should be, if she's elevating herself as a provocateur, like taking the next step is using this text to go full on gonzo, just taking it and going so extreme that like Michael and Pam, who got all the goodwill from greenlighting projects in 2025, would possibly lose it from having something as deranged as the vision I think she wants to tell. But ultimately it feels very tame. Again, the word tame I say because she feels like she's pulling punches in a way to tell a story, and yet there is a massive commentary about, like what Sophia was mentioning, with book talk, with how sexless we've quote unquote become as the younger generations have started reading these books, how romanticized that these old novels have become, like Jane Austen or Bronte, and how this is the way of somebody's life, how they project themselves upon it to the point of obsession where no man can live up to these mythical figures. There's all of this stuff to be just picked apart and pulled apart, and that's what a provocateur is supposed to do. The problem is she doesn't give a shit about any of that. She wants to be with Heathcliff, and she can't help herself in a lot of ways of looking past that. And she ultimately, honestly, becomes the subject she should be critiquing, but she's not. And that, to me, as I was watching, I was like, girl, you're in this, but this shouldn't be about you. This isn't about you. Directors can put themselves in things for sure and it'd be personal, but this felt right for a takedown. This felt right to be more scandalous. And yes, it's going to make a ton of money and people are going to go see it, but the audience scores have already indicated that they didn't kind of get what they wanted either through the marketing. And I think that that's fascinating. I don't think it has to be beholden to the source text. I think if you're going to go out there, like Sophia, you're right. One Battle After Another is a perfect example. Paul Thomas Anderson's a perfect example. So, of taking a text and its ideas and then putting what the author or what the auteur wants upon that text. And I mean, Oil is such a loose adaptation of, There Will Be Blood is such a loose adaptation of Oil. Like, this could have had that. But again, also to some of what Dan is saying, to some of what Josh is saying, the second half of the book could have even died further into the madness, into some of the things that, could have really elevated the first half of this film. But that would require somebody that knows how to adapt and write enough of a really good screenplays to get us there. And I wouldn't have trusted her to be able to take the second half of that book and go all the way with it either, because it just would have been like, oh, doesn't he look sad crying that he lost her? He's so hot while he's crying.
He does look hot when he's crying.
He does, doesn't he? And we would have just seen 30 more minutes of that
Emerald
shit.
Fennell's right to just want to fuck her star, because
I think
every male director for the last 100 years has done this.
Yeah.
That's totally fair.
let
But
her
if
have
that's
it.
your only thing you've got going for you,
It isn't the only.
it really
No,
is. It
it's
really
not.
is for me.
I think visually, though, I think she is doing interesting, unique things visually. It really is just a writing issue for me. and the writing problems in this movie are just made worse. Like they are put under a microscope because it's a Brontë adaptation. I think that's also part of the problem.
But she's
Because
also
the,
had inconsistencies throughout her
well, of
career with the
course.
first two films in her scripts.
I'm not even talking
you know.
I'm not going to talk about Promising Young Woman because people have gotten angry since I've started talking about that in 2020.
No, I get
so I'm
it.
not going to do that now.
No,
But-
no, I know, but I'm just saying
No.
it's that this is a pattern. It's not.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
you know,
of
for
course.
most, there are people that actually don't like any of her films. Like
Yeah.
we at least like one of them here. There are people
She'd
that
be a
don't like
great
any
music
of them.
video director.
Like
Totally.
Yes.
I know for our friend Cody Derricks who writes for the site, he does not like any of these things.
Yeah.
So we, you
but
know,
his grades have gone up.
yeah,
Which is
yeah,
true.
which
I
is
mean,
This got
interesting.
half a star more.
Half a star, right?
Yeah.
But what I mean is that I think with an original screenplay, when you see flaws, you're like, oh, okay, like it's their thing. Like you don't have anything to compare it to, right? Whereas here, it's kind of like with the choices that she made to cut characters and to cut corners, we don't have enough information then to understand why these characters drastically make these big swings emotionally.
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
like when you all of a sudden, like in the novel, and again, like I said, I don't care so much when you aren't loyal to a source material, but I think it was a big mistake for her to not have Hindley.
Yes,
brother.
yes. Oh my God, the
Big
key
mistake.
to Heathcliff's whole character and what
He's
happens
the
in
key.
the house. Yeah,
Yes, he's the key. And
it
the
made me so
difference,
mad.
right? And the difference between how the father treats
Yeah.
Hindley and Kathy and Heathcliff is major to who Heathcliff becomes. And when you conflate characters and suddenly the dad is just this angry drunk who, by the way, also treats Kathy horribly, then suddenly it doesn't make as much sense when Heathcliff feels so abandoned by Kathy when she leaves to go to the Lintons, because the huge part with Hindley is like he is using all of the power that he has to change Heathcliff's situation even more. Heathcliff tastes a new life. He tastes education. He feels something new, and Hindley takes that away from him. So what does Heathcliff do? He says, I'm going to take it away from the future of this family. Well, without Hindley, you don't have Hareton Earnshaw either. So Fennell kind of acts like the second part of this book doesn't even happen in her mind, because also, if you think about Kathy's future too, the future line doesn't exist in Fennell's mind. And I think that is also kind of a crucial mistake, because Heathcliff, there has to be an impetus for that change and for that anger. And if it's just, oh, this woman that I loved growing up chose a rich guy, then suddenly it's just reduced to this love triangle, and you don't have this complication of who is Heathcliff punishing and why. And the same thing goes for Kathy. I think when we see Kathy flip to this like wicked, dangerous liaisons type character, it doesn't work because it's not totally believable. I love that kind of wicked side. I love mean, nasty characters like that, but it just doesn't totally fit with who she is and who she's been up to that point. And on the Kathy point, one more thing. I do want to ask you guys, I think, just about more about casting in general, because I think it's really interesting. But I just think Margot Robbie here, I've made this comparison a few times, but this to me reminded me so much of when Reese Witherspoon was producing Gone Girl and she really wanted to be Amy Dunn. And Fincher said no. And we got Rosamund Pike instead, which I think is a much better choice. Sometimes a choice needs to be made where a person might not be the right fit for a part. And I feel like you have Alison Oliver right there. Like she just would have been such a good Kathy, I think. Like she just fits that a bit more, I think, from what I was imagining. But we also have, importantly, she does this Bridgerton colorblind casting thing. By doing this, she makes, whether it's, I don't think it's intentional. I think you could argue that it is intentional, but I think it's a major unforced error to cast actors of color in parts that are strictly written here as obstacles to the white love story at the center.
I will say that in terms of that casting, look, I love Shazad Latif as an actor. Casting him as Edgar Linton of all people, like
Right.
of all characters in literature, he is like the embodiment of like proper English mannerisms and this
I pictured Joe
propriety.
Alwyn when I
Yes, exactly.
read the book.
Yes, it's a Joe Alwyn type, and to cast Shazad Latif in that role is like, I love him. More opportunities for him as an actor, absolutely. But like, it feels like a miss of like, what, like, were you trying to say something here? Because
It almost feels like a troll at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Honestly,
It's
like
especially
I don't see
when
how
you
it's not. I don't see
Yeah.
how it was
Yeah.
and not an unforced error. It was an intentional one, I think, 100%
I don't know.
from the beginning.
I
But
don't know if she thinks about race really at all.
Yeah,
though.
she is.
I don't
I
know.
mean,
no,
people from her side of the world don't really see race.
I
well,
mean,
but
yes,
also
there-
like they do
there
that a
is
lot,
that.
as
They
Sophia
do.
mentioned, that there is like this colorblind casting that
Yeah.
often happens with like British productions, which
Mhm.
would be fine if you weren't adapting a text that has so many
Yes.
conversations about the
About
racial
racial
identity of your
ambiguity.
characters.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the casting in her films of characters of color haven't been like those characters haven't been the most fleshed out characters in both Promising Young Woman and in Saltburn either. So it's so that maybe it's
Although
just
Archie
another.
could have played Heathcliff, you know.
He could have played
Yeah,
that
he
as
could've.
well. I mean,
Would have been
I think
interesting.
that the fundamental problem with this, besides the men, and I also Sophia, I would think was also alluding to Hong Chau there as well, and that's another person of color and an obstacle of this love of this. But to me, it is Margot Robbie. Like she feels like she's everybody else seems to kind of be in the similar film. She feels like she is so miscast in this movie and takes this thing down because and it's scene to scene. And for me, I was watching an actress age out of being characters like this. It was also weird to see like someone who's what she's in her mid 30s and then Elordi's in his 20s, but they were playing kids that are the same age. It felt so weird, all the different age dichotomies and whatnot, and the accent choice. And it just, to me, I was watching Margot Robbie, who I think she's very good in something like Barbie. She's kind of inconsistent in something like Babylon, but she can be very good. She can be very good. But it felt like her as this producer here with Fennell, they had it was like a friend helping a friend here. It was like my friend's much more famous than I am, and I can get Warner Brothers to give me a little bit more money than Netflix, and I can get this on the big screen and justify it if I have her in it, as opposed to somebody like Alison Oliver or Kaylee Spaney or any young actor or Margaret Qualley or anybody that could play a younger version of Kathy. And it just doesn't work here because it's like it then does kind of read if you're going to cast Margot Robbie here, then that should also then make a commentary of the book talk, older, millennial generation as well there too, kind of still living in this, perfect fantasy, but it doesn't do that. It does
just
this
say
movie,
virgins, Ryan.
yeah, I mean, pretty much, but it goes to that like, okay, either pick the commentary or pick the straightforward version of this movie you want to tell. This movie kind of dances between two, and it doesn't decide to do either one all the way. And so you're kind of just left with a massive puddle of ideas that are very, very sticky and icky and gross and skin rooms and all this bullshit. And you're like, I don't care about anything because honestly, it doesn't make any sense. The ending really is bad. And what it also kind of then says, if you're going to cast these two men opposite of color, also is like, I don't want to have a family with this person, regardless of their money. I don't want to bear their child because the white fantasy is riding off on that horse and I want to be with that guy. And then what it says in like the final shots, it's just like, God damn, this is terrible messaging. It really is. It really is. When you kind of, once again, when you pick apart what the movie you see is from Emerald Fennell, good Lord, does it say some really uncomfortable things about her as a writer and her place and what she sees of this novel and what she thinks of these characters, what she thinks of her actors. That's how I felt by the end of it. It's like, good Lord, you really don't get any of this.
See, that's what I kind of like. She has like a lack of self-awareness, of her upbringing and everything that colors everything that she does. So when we talk about colorblind casting, it's because she's coming from a place that she's probably had servants. And so there is an ease to it that, so when I say it's intentional, I just mean that it's the only way that she knows how to do things. And so there is something that, again, to me is both incredibly problematic about it, but standing on the outside looking in, very fascinating just to deconstruct and to talk about. But I want to bring something back to what Dan said, because it made me think of something and think of a comp. And that was, Dan, when you mentioned Fennell reading the book at the time, versus making the movie now. And I immediately thought of Luca Guadagnino and reading Queer as a 17-year-old and then making the movie as a 55-year-old. And how, I mean, very specifically with those two characters, when you read the book as a teenager, you are the younger one. When you make the movie as an adult, you are the older one. There is a dynamic there that he knew how to play with. I mean, I think Queer is just
I agree.
Phenomenally perfect adaptation. And, this tiny book turned into this 2-hour, 40-minute opus. But I think he understood exactly what the book was, what those characters were, but also who he was at 17, who he was at 55 to make it. And I think something like that is, again, also something that's missing from Fennell, who's made a point of saying that this is, the version that she thought of when she read it.
And Eric, you know what Luca did? He got somebody else to write the damn film.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And he gave him all the tools and all those ideas and everything, and somebody else who's a great writer took it and gave him the script that he wanted.
That's what you need. Like, you have to look at it and reflect on where you were and where you are now, and combine those into something that I think can embrace the fun and the over-the-top drama that you experienced when you were young, but just give it a little bit more clarity that comes with age. I love the soapiness and that dramatic feel of, what is this character going to do next? It's not going to be normal. And that's perfect for Fennell, right?
That's perfect for Alison Oliver's character, who's like in every scene. She is so unexpected. I think one of the funniest things I've seen in the last couple of years was the Christmas gift.
Oh my gosh. All the yonic and phallic imagery.
Yeah, and it was like,
it's
so funny.
This is a rose. It reminds me of you. You're like,
remember, you love mushrooms? I was sitting there, I was like, okay, this is great.
Yeah.
So
Like, this is
funny.
the type of tone, though, that the movie kind of wishes that it wants to have, and to me as an audience member, it was like, it's like she was edging us the entire time with this type of tone, and then going back to the self-serious crap that I didn't care for. Like, and then she would throw out, poor Alison Oliver's like the edger of this film, because you get like something exciting from her at every turn. Her reading of Romeo and Juliet, the book, her crawling on the ground. Like, it's all these scenes. It's these 3 or 4 scenes, and you're like, this is a star. This is a performance.
Oh,
this is
Honestly, everything from when Kathy falls off of the wall,
the ribbon room, all this shit.
And everything in between that and going back home is so fantastic and fun. And it's weird because she does play Kathy like a 16-year-old. It starts to feel like Clueless. It feels like Jane Austen's Emma. Like,
honestly,
they are
like Cruel Intentions
a bit, but it doesn't get there quite yet.
Fully.
She's just a little bit, and then she does take that very much more directly cruel turn, and then it does become that. But there's such a funny innocence at the beginning when she's there with the dollhouse and doing, oh my God.
But also too, like, what's so great about it, for me at least, when I was watching it, was like, because this character is innocent and there's such a wackiness to her. There's that lingering in the back of your head that this character can flip because that's the expectation from Emerald Fennell and the type of films that she's made. And that's the only character I felt that from. This sort of at any point, something crazy or wild or unexpected or different or provocative could happen. And the rest
we
of
get
them,
it from the movie.
And
like,
we
there's
get
that
it.
scene between her and Heathcliff when he's trying to send a letter and she's mocking him for being illiterate. And like when that moment happened, that was like, oh, this character that we all think is like very meek and reserved, like has a darker side to it. And that was when I was like, okay, where's this movie? Like, I want to watch this movie now between these two freaks. Like, I want to see this now.
I did really love that Isabella was getting in on the cruelty. And everyone else was. And like, I loved that for her. And I thought that was such a great, fresh take on that character. And to bring the conversation back a little bit to Margot, it's so fascinating because I think her best moments in this movie are when she's kind of taken the piss out of the romance, when she is being that catty mean girl, when she is being funny, when she is sort of like, when she's sort of against her better judgment, enjoying herself in the gilded cage of Thrushcross Grange. I think all of that, she's very sharp and fun, and she's very unexpectedly funny at a lot of points in this movie. But I think when she has to play the romance, which is far too often because that is what Emerald Fennell wants to focus on, it kind of dies because that's when it becomes just another romance. She's sort of removed all the personality from it. And I love the early stuff with the kids because Kathy is fucking mean to Heathcliff.
Kids are good.
As she should be. And I forgive her some for the Margot casting because I think Margot is such a believably older version of that child actress for Kathy. That perfect casting on that take. They have a very similar like way of speaking and presenting themselves that I thought speaks really highly of both of them. But once we get to adult Kathy and Heathcliff, it just feels like any other romance. We have so much less of the things that make their relationship interesting. And as it goes on, we lose more and more of that because she's so focused on they're the OTP. This is all we care about is their relationship and being together, to the extent that they're going to completely throw out everything else that is interesting about Wuthering Heights.
And I think some of the character changes. So I know I talked about not liking the fact that Hindley was absent. I think that really destroys a lot of it. But I kind of like that she went that way with Isabella and pushed her to a place that is so different from the outcome we see in the book, with her just fleeing this abusive relationship and secretly writing letters away from Heathcliff, right? Here, she's pushing back. It's almost like there was a part of her that had to be hidden or that she hadn't accessed within herself when she was living at Thrushcross Grange. So I liked that. I actually like that Fennell makes Nellie a deliberate antagonist because a lot of people who read the book hate Nellie and think she's horrible. And her greatest sin is that she is this devoutly Christian woman who just lies all the time. Like there is like something there that I think is so interesting that Fennell could have pushed further. But we can keep talking about characters, but I think we have to talk about the sex in the movie because I feel like that's what a lot of audiences will want to see in this movie. And I personally felt very let down by it. I think there are some
Best
choices.
of luck to them.
Yeah. I think there are some good choices.
Chased.
Yeah. And I think what's weird is like you have like him lifting her up by the corset. Everything Jacob Elordi is doing with his tongue is amazing, and I need a supercut of that. But I just feel like
I need you to monologue about it. It seems like
I'll monologue about it, sure. But I just don't. I never at any point buy the sex here, because if you are taking the leap as a storyteller to say these are two of my favorite characters in all of literature who famously never consummate their love, right? And I'm changing that. I'm saying, no, I'm giving you a montage instead where they're just going at it. But she doesn't do that. It's so chaste and it doesn't have to be. So I just felt kind of like, am I missing something? Because I am just not as into this as I should be. Would I also like to be a Kathy insert here? Yes, obviously.
Do we think that again though is an intentional choice by Fennell? Because I don't think anything that happens in her films is by accident. She could have absolutely shown more, but she doesn't. So why does she hold back?
It feels like this is a second cut of a longer, artier, more daring version that got bad test scores. But from all that I have heard, it's not. It feels very weird because it's like half going there. It's giving you like a lot of, hot and heavy sex, and it's like going in the direction of being a bodice ripper, but we never actually see the bodice being ripped. Like
Right.
it was like Ryan was saying, like it's kind of constantly teasing us with this, but never actually going there. And if you are, like Sophia said, going to take the leap of this time Kathy and Heathcliff fuck, and then that's the fucking we get. It's like, why are you taking such a half measure with this? It's almost like she wanted there to be like the specter of incest hanging over them was enough to be provocative and do that stuff, but like she doesn't lean into even that as much as she could have, which I did love that shot of the maids looking at Mr. Earnshaw being like, really, you expect us to believe that bullshit? But like that is all that they ever do to relate that to his potential parentage,
Right?
And like, if you're gonna say like this is all hot, like ooh, because they're potentially brother and sister, they don't even go that route.
Yeah, to me the issue is that it feels like a movie that wants to do both the yearning but also the like real intimate sex at the same time. And it's like I think this once again speaks to the confusion of tones and how this movie can't nail one particular pathway down for it. Because like if you want to do a movie about yearning and this sort of repressed sexuality and then use the imagery of like the slugs and the eggs and people, with their hands in that, like all for it. I'm with you on that. But then you gotta commit to then like not having the sex then and having these elements represent that. If we're going to have the sex, then okay, then now the yearning stuff doesn't make any sense to me at all. And I think it's once again just such confusing storytelling to me.
Yeah, it is. And it just for me was never at a believable level where I kept thinking, like, this is not a believable way that I would think of, like, if you haven't been with someone in years and like they are the love of your life and you've been trapped in this marriage where you're having like missionary sex with your husband all the time and you're just thinking about this hot man wherever he might be. I just can't believe that this is what you're going to do when you finally get that man. Sorry.
I think you're absolutely right. It's that like per what this movie does, the marketing of this movie is intentional. I think she wants him to fuck. And I think the scene that summarizes this whole experience, and when I realize, oh, there ain't gonna be anything in this thing, is the scene where Kathy's upstairs and she sees the two people there, like, like the people that work in the stables and the maid, and he's gonna use whips and tie her up and all this stuff. And I'm like, and this was when I was like, oh, this is Emerald Fennell. Like, we're gonna see some Saltburn shit. Like, we're gonna see the sex, or like, because that movie, whether you like it or not, it's fucking a dead corpse, and there's the lick in the bathtub, and then there's him dancing, Barry Keoghan's murdering on the dance floor with it all hanging out. You know what I mean? All the banshees of Sharon just light out there on the floor. And yet it's like there's more in that than there is in this, because she cuts away, closes, and we hear none of what happens. We don't even hear what happens with those two. We don't hear, anything remotely.
You can hear
not
the
all,
sounds.
not enough. Not enough to
I'll
go all the
say
way.
that Heathcliff in that moment laying on
Yeah,
top of her, covering her eyes and mouth, that is hotter to me than any of the sex that we see in the movie.
Yeah, because then
and that's
yearning,
intentional.
Right, yeah.
That's a great moment.
But then, to your point, like Sophia, like when they finally are like, there's this really fast, but like 4 scene montage of them having sex. It's nowhere it's almost as vanilla as what she's had with Linton, and I don't think that that's intentional. Like I personally, I don't. I think it's like, no, she's wanting to be with this guy forever. She's willing to throw it all away. Like, let them be damned. All right, well then show us how damned you want to be. Because then it kind of was like, it was reminding me a little bit of like when I saw the montage of when Kate Winslet and Saoirse Ronan talked about having sex for Ammonite. It was like that they thought that they had like invented sitting on someone, and that it was like this revolutionary thing.
I can't do this again.
And yet it was like, great, I'm glad you brainstormed this over a kale salad. Like, it was the most tamest thing in the world. But then it also was reminded me of a problem I had. I think it came out last year. And Josh, I'm not ripping Diego Calva, so don't get mad. But On Swift Horses was a movie that came out last year. He could have been
Heathcliff.
And when I was watching that film, the steamy scenes in that film as well too. They everything that's supposed to be steamy and hot and sexy and about that movie
feels weirdly tame.
Very tame. And
I don't know about that.
Like,
very
they're
much
hot, but it's kind of like bare minimum hotness.
Yeah, it's like Calva and Elordi are fully clothed for most of those scenes as well too.
It's supposed to be like world changing.
They're in tidy whities for most of those scenes.
I want it
super hot.
Go all the way. No,
it's super hot because they have hot bodies. It's not super hot because of how it's filmed and what they're doing.
Correct. Dan's absolutely right on this.
You just want to see dicks. That's just what you
want.
Correct. You just
want to see dicks. Kind of promised that before.
Come on.
I mean, when I was watching this though, I kept like, my thought initially was, like Jacob Elordi's writer has changed. Like
hers has changed too.
Like his nudity clause is different. Like something has changed since Euphoria. Like that was my cynical.
Yeah, something has changed for her since Wolf of Wall Street.
Maybe because like they won't do nudity anymore.
Because she's not wild and crazy either in Babylon, which is a movie that's supposed to be wild and crazy and has nudity left and right. And she's in that red outfit for like 40, like for an hour of all this stuff. All these things are going on. I think her writers change. I'm not saying that I need them to have nudity, but like, for God's sakes, like take off the corset or something, like,
or if you want that to be the point, then you got to make it the point.
If you're tightening and tightening and tightening this to constrain the fact that you are holding in your lust and your sexual desire for this person that you love, then when it is time to have sex with them, it was very like something's got to give was in my head with the turtleneck. Like
cutting the turtleneck off hotter than what's happening.
Hotter than anything in this movie. Like it was like it's.
As I'm wearing my white Diane Keaton turtleneck.
It's about this, but it's about buildup and it's about anticipation. It's about imagery and using that and sound and all of that to build up to something that. For Fennell, she's usually pretty good at building up to something bombastic, something wild, something crazy. And it doesn't lead to that. It's just like, it's no different of a montage than when she becomes wealthy. And that maybe says something about how like something in your mind becomes just as vanilla as the mundanity of life, but it doesn't really convey it nearly as much as it should or be as purposeful and pointed as it should be.
Well, I think part of the issue too is that like for me, one of the reasons why Heathcliff over time has been so misinterpreted or interpreted depending on how you want to view it as this romantic hero is because he has so much agony and passion inside. Like he's just like waiting to burst at any given moment. And I think you can do so much with that and translating it into sex and sexuality for a modern audience in a way that isn't in the book. So again, it's like we've been saying, either stick to the yearning that you've clearly thought about a little bit more and get us into that headspace. This just feels like it's going halfway, and it's not it feels like she's afraid to commit to something that feels right, entirely different and new. And I think a huge point of the book too is, and she gets here a little bit, is this theme of imprisonment and being isolated and trapped in your circumstances. And I think she tries to get there a little bit too, but again, I don't totally see how she unpacks that here or digs into it in any way other than to just say like marriage is bad.
Yeah, I think a lot about the that image of Kathy putting her finger into the fish jello mold and the fish's
Yum.
mouth. And it seems like a lot of like, if this is supposed to be like the sexual imagery, it is really, really tame. And like as a metaphor, I'm gonna need more here, Emerald. Like this is not nearly provocative enough for you specifically. And on top of that, if that is supposed to be her like seeing the fish as a version of herself, like trapped in this chain, like it's a fucking jello mold. Like you can burst out of that really fucking easily. You know, like those walls are very permeable.
Well, I mean, that again, maybe
like,
that's her 14-year-old brain thinking that, oh, this is provocative, this is
yeah,
racy,
like
this is a metaphor for sex. But I mean, come on, you are an adult now. I also think that there's a weird thing that happens when you have lead characters that are extremely unlikable, but you still root for them anyway, because a really well-drawn villain, and Dangerous Liaisons is a perfect example, or There Will Be Blood, you're still drawn to those people even while they're doing the most heinous things. And I didn't feel that for Kathy or Heathcliff. You know who I did feel it for? I felt it for Nellie. I was just like, fuck Kathy, burn those letters. She was like Mrs. Danvers or something.
well,
She was like a Danvers type.
She very
much to me. So she became my
North Star,
my inroad that I could
Yeah.
go, okay, here is a person doing bad things, but I can justify what she's doing because she's justifying what she's doing in a way that the other two are not.
Yeah, I do wish though it was a little bit more pointed from her perspective. I actually like, I thought Hong Chau was good. I just don't think that she got enough in the first half of the film, and I wish that by the time they make that turn for her to essentially be the, I wouldn't say she's a villain. I think she's just properly pissed and trying to
Sophia's when she's an obstacle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When she becomes an obstacle, she does have a point of view at least, because of her shared history with the two. But it should have been, the movie visually tries to make it at times through her perspective, like when Nellie is seeing them play out in the field and she's inside, and she has that great moment where, the other housemate is just like, well, you're not to their stash, and she knocks the cup down, basically like, well, then fine, you clean it up, bitch. And
that is
like,
a great scene. You're not her friend. Friends don't pay you to be friends.
And it's like, well, what am I paying you for? Then get the hell out. Like there could have been
that scene.
Some more of that.
That's the thing. Like I do love the sort of the twist that she made with Nellie, that like she was also like the daughter of a lord. So she has ideas of how Kathy, who actually is, potentially an heir, should be acting. And I thought that Hong Chau played that really smartly. And I loved that when Kathy told her, like, you will find another position. Nellie was like, and give up a warm house, bed, and food for every day? Fuck you, bitch. I know what side my bread is buttered on, and it's
Edgar.
Well, I liked so good.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to me because that feels like something that is like a Heathcliff move, how he sort of takes in the second half of the book, takes all these structures that have enabled and allowed the Earnshaws and the Lintons to rise, and uses it against them. And that is exactly what Nellie is doing. She is using her knowledge about structure and society and how these things work to her advantage against the better will of these people. I don't think it's fully successful in the picture of the overall movie, but I like that she found this really sneaky way to include that in her version of this story.
I agree. I love what she does with her there.
Well, it's funny too, because she almost is like, it's almost like she wants to make Nellie, part Hindley, part Heathcliff.
Yeah.
Like there is like she's trying to incorporate all of those kind of antagonistic, spicy traits that they have, really snarky things they do into one character. And the funny part of it is, like, Ryan, you talking about the perspective, it's like she had the blueprint of it being from Nellie's perspective because Nellie's the narrator in the book.
Yes.
Like that would have been, I think, she could have done something really clever with that, but also like she could have gone Gothic in a different direction, which is to say, like, actually, I'm telling this from a perspective of a woman who's reading this book and inserting herself right into the story. But she
how she would have maybe
Yeah.
manipulated even more of this relationship, you know, and how she's even more of the cause of Kathy and Heathcliff's self-destruction. And then by then, when you see Alison Oliver on all fours on the ground, there is a profound sense of regret and responsibility for these actions that Nellie could have. But again, I sound like a broken record. It's not there enough. And that's just the disappointing thing. It's like, but I will say one thing. This is a fascinating test for Fennell. And it's actually one, even though I'm so mixed on this thing, and I know we've mostly had a mixed, frustrating conversation, it actually is so good that this is going to be a success, because up to this point, she has not proven herself at all to be a box office presence, a cinematic presence on the big screen. Because Promising Young Woman was a COVID film, and because Saltburn went straight to Amazon, this is her first real test with a larger thematic audience in a cinema. Yes, it is, Eric. Don't shake your head.
It didn't go straight to Amazon.
It did go straight to Amazon. That's where most people saw it. That's where most people saw it.
That's a different thing.
That's where the majority of people saw it. It barely was
two different things.
It wasn't a hit. And this is a hit. She actually has a hit now.
That's fine.
And that film, though, got its audience from streaming, from TikTok, from becoming a cult thing online. This actually has the potential. It's already made, what, 82 million worldwide on its opening weekend on an $80 million budget. Mm-hmm. Hopefully it'll break even for itself. It'll be very fascinating to see what she does next. And once again, I will say, get a co-writer, for God's sakes. Like that's the number one thing I could take away from this experience. But the audience score being a B as well too, that does speak to a little bit of it also being like not what the audience was fully expecting as well. So
it should have been a BDSM, but it was just a B.
There you go.
Well, but to your point, Ryan, I think it would
be a good test.
Great to have just a tiny sidebar of the backstory of why this is at Warner Brothers, because Netflix offered her $150 million and she said, no, I want a real big theatrical presence. Yes. She took 80 instead, and here's where we are. And Maggie Gyllenhaal did the exact same thing.
Yeah.
It was going to be Netflix. She said, no, I want a big theatrical release. And Warner Brothers again came in and said, all right, let's do that.
Well, now they'll just be getting the 150.
Yeah,
because...
the cruel irony of what could happen with all of that is not lost on me.
It is very fascinating, though, in that it literally was half the budget that they were going to be. And obviously that's because of actors up front and you know, there's no box office. But this movie, because of its trailers, because of its controversy, because of who Emerald Fennell is and how she's able to push things, I do find that its success this weekend is in large part because of its marketing, because it's in theaters, because of it's there. I don't know how well a movie like this would have done on just a straight streaming platform, how Netflix markets it differently, and the build up and the hate for it. You know, it'll be very interesting going forward once Netflix takes over, how movies like this will exist, because it's a big budget, but it's not, you know, a superhero budget. You know, it's still in the $70-80 million range. And it's proving to have an audience. And most films right now are seeming to have an audience. But this one in particular, even with being a kind of a soft R, it did really well for itself. It's a soft art from the standpoint of like if you're expecting a full on sex show, that's not what this movie is. It would have played really well on Netflix from that standpoint.
It's just a funny phrase.
Definitely a movie I would have watched at a sleepover growing up,
Yeah.
even though it's R. And I would have been like, oh yeah,
This would be like,
we're putting that on again.
we're gonna watch
It's
Wuthering
Heights
Heights
time.
Yeah.
Cinemax.
Make sure you.
Oh,
Oh my
very
god!
much.
For
Oh,
Yeah.
very much. Yep.
I will say that like for 80 million, it looks like it cost a little more than that. Like you see every penny of that money on screen.
See,
Good for
I
her
disagree.
in that way.
I disagree,
Like,
Dan. I
do
think
I
she could have
think
done a
that
couple
some
more
of it-
million.
Like I will say, do I think that a lot of it looks rather tacky? Yes, but I
Yeah.
can see where all the money went, and I actually think that tackiness is very much the point.
Deliciously
I think
tacky.
so.
Love it. Yeah.
of course.
Rich people have
of
horrible
course.
tastes. Like that's the point.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Bad
Yeah.
taste. Yeah. I think let's transition into the BAFTAs. But before we do that, any final thoughts on Wuthering Heights? I'll just say that I have been listening to the Charlie XCX soundtrack on its own, and it is very fun. I don't think it entirely works in the movie. I was laughing very hard at the end when women around me were crying and we just transitioned into hyperpop. Like that was very funny.
Yeah.
That felt like the Fennell experience. So
I mean,
The ending
I
of this
love
movie is
that-
so weird.
that we got new
It's
music
so
from
weird.
Sky Ferreira for
Yes.
Yeah.
finally. But House, now that I re-listened to it and have seen the Testament of Anne Lee 4 times,
Mhm.
I'm like, this is the Testament of Anne Lee.
yeah.
What is going on here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that for me, I think what sums up my feelings about the movie is thinking about the ending to the film, where it's very big and dramatic and emotional, and the music's swelling, and it's supposed to be like really like deeply felt within this moment. And I just kept thinking, man, like 3 scenes ago, we just saw a woman on the floor in a dog collar. And I just don't think this really goes all that well together. And I think that just perfectly summed up how tonally this movie does not work. And it feels like it has the Fennell instincts, but is changed literally to material that needs to be like more subtle or more interior. And that's just not her bag. And that's fine. But I think attaching it to this book was not a very well matched situation to me. And I think that's why, despite it looking very pretty, it is another exercise that I think from her is pretty hollow.
Ken Russell and Goes BBC.
Yeah. It was like those final shots. I was like, oh, I've seen The Shining too. You know, it's like it's
God.
you know,
But
it's
that
yeah.
ending is just so, and that was the biggest thing. Cause like I got Jacob Elordi's casting in those moments. I think
Yeah.
he
Mhm.
makes that final plea for her to haunt him really emotional in a way
I
that
keep
I was
writing
not
in
expecting.
writing in the storm to her. I was
yeah,
like,
it's great.
I actually buy it. I bought
Yeah.
him.
Oh
there.
yeah, it's great. But then it just kind of ends.
Yeah. And it's just like,
I just like we're into credits. I'm like that's
Nope.
it.
nope, we're not going to deal with any of this. Okay,
okay.
cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, this feels like there should have been something more there.
Well, I think it's safe to say that Wuthering Heights was a bit of a mixed bag for us, but it was fun to discuss it anyway. And I did see it again. I saw it a second time and I didn't hate my experience. I had a good time, but it's just not the film I think I was hoping for. So let's head now to our BAFTA preview. So we're not going to be giving full predictions. I think just a general state of the race talk. So one battle after another is our nomination leader with 14 nominations total. Our voting window is going on right now. So it started January 28th. It ends February 17th. And we will find out our winners on the 22nd. I think just let's talk about how we think BAFTA will shape the race. I think once we get to BAFTA, we have an entire Academy voting. So we have a lot of crossover with the Academy, but also importantly across different branches. So we're not just seeing the directors or just seeing the producers, just seeing the actors. We're really seeing how an entire Academy feels about the race. So I'm curious where you guys think this might confirm races and where it might provide an alternative in others. Erik, we can start with you.
You know, it's the BAFTA's really funny where you'll have years that the top 8 matches Oscars top 8 like exactly, and then you'll have really crazy years like, you know, whatever, like All Quiet on the Western Front, where they just don't align at all. So you can't really say or know if it's going to be one or the other or a combination. I am leaning to thinking that the top 8 winners are going to be the top 8 winners at the Oscars. I think it's going to match up. I think it's just going to confirm one battle and help lock in the supporting races, because I feel like the lead races feel like they are what they are, but the supporting races are the two that feel like there's the most room. I don't know. I just feel like this is where we're gonna have that. And of course, I'm always keeping an eye on the casting win as well, because that's, as young as that award really is, that has been so good at showing us the real tea.
Yeah. And with casting, what's interesting at BAFTA is it always aligns. I mean, we don't have a lot of statistical history on it, but it always aligns with an acting winner. So here we have for casting, I Swear, Marty Supreme, One Battle After Another, Sentimental Value in Sinners. Hamnet is interestingly not here at the BAFTAs.
I'm shocked by that, because at first I was like, oh, I'm going to predict Hamnet to win casting because that makes sense. It's like, oh, it's not nominated. That's very odd to me.
Yeah, and then getting Emily Watson in. It's an insane miss.
Very strange.
That movie's struggled, so.
Yeah, it has. Josh, what do you think about the BAFTAs?
I mean, yeah, I agree with that general assessment. I do wonder about actually Hamnet in Best Film, just because that movie's done pretty well at the box office in England. It's like been kind of a hit. So I do wonder if maybe it can rally support there. But even if it did win, it's like, well, that's home field advantage. But otherwise, yeah, I agree with most of the acting wins are probably going to repeat. The one category I'm actually really curious about is cinematography. That's actually the one for me, because I have noticed that there is like this interesting stat out there where if you look at BAFTA, BSC, and ASC, if a movie wins 2 out of those 3, it ends up winning the Oscar. And so now that One Battle already won BSC, I'm very curious to see if it can repeat at BAFTA. And if it does, I think that's your Oscar winner. If, but this is a more general voting branch. It's not just cinematographers. So if a more general academy can pick something like Sinners, all right, well, then it's down to ASC to see which one to go with in that situation. So that is actually the below the line category I am keeping a real close eye on.
Yeah, I think that's a good call out. It really is the 2 of the 3. And BSC and BAFTA don't always line up. Sometimes we see them go in a different direction. But yeah, I'm in my head, I've always, and I mentioned this on our editors pod, but I've always had Train Dreams winning ASC. I can't really say why. Really? Okay. And so that for me here, like if it's Train Dreams or One Battle, that's interesting too, because Sinners and cinematography, I've never really been able to know if that just feels like something that critics decided on, or if that is a thing that carries over to the industry or not. I'm wondering about these acting races though. I don't think we're going to see too many surprises. I just do not, I'm going to go out there and say it. I do not buy into Inga Ibsdottir Lilius winning BAFTA like many people think. I love that performance, but that just feels like hope dicting to me at this point. Like this just
I think it feels to me like thinking that BAFTA's not going to pick the black actress. I think that's what it's really coming from.
I think that could be, but I also feel like I think BAFTA will be a show of strength for One Battle After Another. I think it has a lot of support in the UK, and I think there are some places where Hamnet could do well, but I also could see them saying like, oh, this is our British film winner. Like it's a perfect British film winner.
Yeah.
Jessie is going to win, where I just think, I personally just do feel like it's going to be One Battle in film and director, even though Hamnet has done really well there too.
Yeah, I have my full predictions and I'm putting them out this week with like a predicted winner and a spoiler. And outside of the 2 that I feel very comfortable that Hamnet is winning, I have it basically second place almost every category. Film, director, adapted screenplay. I think it is that close It's still got 11 nominations there. It just, I think the space between first and second, I think is just going to mostly be pretty wide.
Yeah. Dan, what do you think?
There are a couple. I am watching Hamnet in two categories specifically, and that's supporting actor, because Mescal hasn't won on the film side yet, and him playing William Shakespeare feels like something they could potentially do. I don't think they will, but it's possible. And the other is in production design, because recreating the original Globe Theatre that's catnip to British people, I just think. But overall, the thing that I'm really watching, because I saw it a week ago, is I Swear, particularly in leading actor. Because unlike the Oscars or the Actor Awards, the Brits don't have a reason. They don't have to award Timothée Chalamet. He's not homegrown talent. He's just another young up-and-coming actor who's doing really well. And when I tell you, Robert Aramayo's performance in I Swear is unbelievable.
Do you swear that it's good?
I really do. Like, I swear he is amazing. It's a Beatty as fuck role. He's playing a real person with Tourette syndrome, and it feels like those Tourette's tics and exclamations really are coming organically from his body. It does not feel like he is giving a performance at all. He is fantastic. It's a local movie. It is a local hero. The man was knighted, and I don't know. And Josh had pointed this out to me, that like when BAFTAs do not generally go, they don't pick like a lone British nominee over a potential Oscar winner. They just really don't. But if you are looking for a spoiler in this category, I think it is one that has a very high percentage probability of happening.
I disagree. I think he's last.
Really? Have you seen it?
No, but I don't need to see it, because 25 years of BAFTA history are on my side. It's just unrealistic, because they've always gone with either the eventual Oscar winner or like the second place.
Yeah.
Last time that they didn't was Jamie Bell. And that was when the BAFTA was after the Oscars anyway. So I don't.
Well, not 2000. That was the first year of it being a precursor, though.
Exactly. The idea is appealing. I just don't think that it's in any way likely.
The other time I'm thinking of, which we didn't have the winner in the category, and it was when it was juried, was that weird year when Joanna Scanlon won for After
No
Love.
Oscar nominees in that category. They had no choice.
Right. They were like, oh, it's open. We can kind of do whatever we want. We don't have to.
They were free from the Oscars. Yes.
Yeah. I still need to see. I still need to see I Swear, though.
He's really amazing. Like I was
supposed to see it this week.
Blown away.
I'm gonna try.
Yeah. I mean, it did really well there.
Like in my mind, he just wipes the floor with every other Best Actor nominee.
Oh wow,
he's really incredible.
He's great in the Lord of the Rings show. I love him in that.
And Ryan, what do you think of the BAFTAs? What are you expecting or hoping will happen?
Well, we all know what I'm hoping to happen. What I think will happen is a different story, or maybe it's the same story. Who knows? Can you guys correct me on who won original screenplay back in 2021, 2022 BAFTA?
Yeah.
Oh,
was that Paul Thomas Anderson?
You know that.
Oh, okay. So if that's the case,
right, Mr.
I think they really like him.
Question there. Okay.
I think they really like him, and I think that movie has done targeted campaigning specifically in the UK. Their Instagram feed this morning are 2 UK Warner Brother videos that they are running specifically over there.
The Warner UK account is a one battle takeover.
It really has. They are. Sophia was just there. They are still screening one battle after another at the Prince Charles and 70mm, and have done so for like the last couple of months. Really haven't stopped. Leo and PTA went specifically and did 4 different talks, as well as multiple parties over there as well. They've all shown up at the BAFTA tea parties as well in Los Angeles that are pre-stuff. They have hit this like no other place, really, specifically. I think that UK, as much as like Hamnet has done well there, the international box office has done extremely well for One Battle After Another, and in specifically also in the UK. I think that this movie is going to win the top prize. I think it's going to win director, and then it could potentially walk away with 2 acting prizes. I do not know where those 2 acting prizes will come from, but I have a funny feeling that, you know, Josh, to your point, I do think that they are going to reward Tiana Taylor. They don't have a problem all the time, but in lead actress, they sure do, like the Oscars. But they just rewarded Divine Joy Randolph a couple of years ago, leading to her Oscar win and solidifying that in the race. I think that they'll do that for Tiana Taylor here. And I don't know if it's Benicio del Toro. And honestly, the real spoiler is Leonardo DiCaprio. If this is a place where he could win, it's here. I don't think it's actually at SAG. And if Leo won here, that could hint at one, his campaigning target with BTA, but also it could hint at potentially vulnerability for Chalamet, an actor. I think Chalamet's just going to ultimately win that award because they didn't award him last year there. It's not like a SAG situation where maybe they award somebody different there or Chalamet.
And they
just
award young guys all the time at BAFTA.
Yes.
They do not have the same hang
gave
up
it to
that
Butler.
Oscars do.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah, they gave it to Austin Butler when everybody was sort of home predicting Colin Farrell there as well. So,
and Chalamet has kind of become sort of an international figure now. You know, he's on the French tour now for Marty
Yes.
Supreme. So
they've done a good.
I think he'll win at BAFTA.
I think so too. I mean, he's an international. He's a movie star.
Yeah, he's a movie
his
star,
chance.
yeah.
His chance to do it. I think Buckley will win. Supporting actor is obviously the one that we're all going to be looking at. This is the place for Stellan Skarsgård to win. We
What if it's
assume.
Ken?
We assume. Like that's the thing. What if
he's
it's
never won BAFTA?
He's never won that.
People are talking about that as a possibility.
The Paul Mescal of it all too would be very interesting if he won here or at SAG.
I would lose my mind if that happened.
Just from the standpoint of like it would make
know.
this category ever more difficult.
Yeah.
But I think also original screenplay is a very interesting place as well because here's the thing. This is the thing that everyone has talked about with Sinners is that it's just going to walk in on the night with that win, and Coogler's got one locked in the bag, and that is not even remotely close to the idea that Ryan Coogler walks away with nothing. If it does, that next day, while Dan and I are at South by, I am logging off at Twitter because it will be an absolute nightmare if that is the case. But if he wins at BAFTA, that shows a sign of strength for that. I do think that it'll win some below the line categories. Eric's right.
Or it's just American fiction.
I do agree with Josh. Like cinematography, editing is another one that I think is one you have to look out. Because if One Battle wins editing there, then we can kind of just assume that it's going to win that. Its path is set in stone, and we can start making that play. But is F1 nominated at BAFTA as well too?
Yep. And they love their racing movies.
They love racing movies, and that's where they.
Oh, I'm absolutely predicting F1 at BAFTA for editing.
And so
100%.
Like if there is that, you know, loss to be made by One Battle After Another, is that doesn't mean that all is lost, but I do think that it's going to have a very particularly strong day. Here's the thing about, like, Dan, to your point about the I Swear guy winning that one, I could see your case there, but it's the same thing I told Sophia about Critics' Choice when they went with Paul Thomas Anderson and they went with Chalamet, or they went with places where they don't want to be the odd ones out. These places don't want to be the odd ones out. They want those speeches. They feel like they know what those Oscar winners are going to be. And so it kind of just feels like this is their chance to award them. It's their chance to coronate PTA to that level as well. And much like they did with Nolan, even though Nolan is homegrown, but he kind of, he's bi-coastal.
He straddles the two.
They love PTA, but if there is a potential spoiler, I do agree that it is Hamnet. But if Sinners won,
which to me,
BAFTA, though, that would be
Hamnet,
kind of wild. But I don't think
if Hamnet were to do very well, that actually wouldn't say much about, to me, that movie's chances or it taking down One Battle. I think it would say more about Sinners being a challenger to One Battle After Another.
Exactly.
Yeah. I do want to also say that, like, as we are recording this, we've had 2 more guilds come out. And there have been both of those guilds. I believe the Makeup and Hairstyling Guild we had last night, and we had costume designers. And Frankenstein did well at both of those. Sinners did well at makeup, but the one that showed up at both places still too, even though that they are not competitive in those categories at the Oscars, was one battle after another. And that's not nothing. That is not nothing. That is
it's nothing.
No, it's not nothing.
It's not
because
nothing for them winning in those categories, but it is a strong show of the movie's overall strength.
Correct.
But when I say it's nothing, I'm not trying to like insult the movie these are contemporary categories where it is not a player. It is the biggest movie in that group. And that's not an uncommon thing to go
still wins
with that. And
still wins on the board. Still a movie getting celebrated.
Still an opportunity for people from the movie.
It's also an opportunity where they didn't have to do it.
Yeah.
And they still did. So
sure.
Back to BAFTA for a second. So since 2020, one of the interesting things I'll note is that the nomination leader ends up taking home the most wins at BAFTA, and often including Best Film. So The Year of Nomadland, that had 7 nominations. It won 4 awards. Dune had the most nominations. It won 5. Didn't win Best Film, but still, that was never going to happen that year. All Quiet on the Western Front, 14 nominations. It got 7. Oppenheimer, 13. It got 7. Conclave last year with 12. That tied The Brutalist with 4 wins. So that's telling me, like, one battle after another being our nomination leader, we're going to see a good amount of prizes probably go its way. And I would say with the correlation with film, I think that's a place. I'd be curious if they decided to go somewhere different in screenplay, maybe like, oh, we're just going to give that to Hamnet instead. But that would be, I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to stick with one battle, just like everybody else has there.
I wonder, because we did see when Hamnet's review scores started going down, when it got outside of the festival run and got to UK critics who, much like people that are very obsessed with the fidelity of something like Wuthering Heights, were very, very precious about Shakespeare and put their little tiny feet down in this, that's not my Shakespeare. That is not historically accurate. And I wonder how much of that type, of mindset might bleed over regardless of its 11 nominations, because there are definitely people who...
There are detractors to that film.
There are a lot of detractors to that film and to the screenplay. But I wonder if certain voters just might feel a little precious about Shakespeare.
I wonder about sentimental value being sort of very sneaky in some categories, not just screen,
so. I think
I'm watching
screenplay
that
especially.
movie a lot. Screenplay, because like if you look at that category, that original screenplay category, and the types of films that they tend to go for, that is like the most BAFTA nominee that they have this year. Yeah, and that movie could potentially do like overperform at BAFTA.
But if Sinners wins that category, I think that's done.
Over.
I think if once one battle wins that category, if it wins that in a screenplay, then those are done. Like I would be able to, I would sit very well closing those up. I think I think Jesse's already locked up, so we don't have to worry about that.
Which, my God, thank you so much for a normal Best Actress race this year.
But if there wasn't, if she loses one of these two, I know there'll be a little bit.
There is no way she is losing BAFTA. There is absolutely no way.
Bet my apartment on her winning BAFTA.
I would take the first flight to London and demand to see.
Come on, Kate Hudson, you can do
a role. Kate Hudson, get out of here.
No, but I do wonder about sentimental value. I'm not saying that she would win, but people love Renata Reinsva, and they nominated.
She's my spoiler. She's my number 2,
and she was nominated for Worst Person in the World. A couple of years ago. If there was somebody to beat Jessie Buckley, because there is like Eric said, there's just this. We don't want Hamnet at all. That is definitely the avenue in which I think that they would go. And
well, except that we've already seen the people that don't want Hamnet are still pro Jessie Buckley.
Yes, exactly. No.
She
It's
is
very, very
the
true.
thing that has survived.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, it'll be very fascinating to see what they do. I do mostly agree with Erik that what this lineup looks like is what we're going to get. But we do have different voting times now this year than we did last year, than we had 2-3 years ago. And this lineup falls more in line with the Everything Everywhere All at Once lineup, which then played a significant factor into SAG. Unfortunately, SAG at that year was much more aligned with the Oscars than they are this year because of the international performances that are in contention, that are strongly in contention, not being nominated at SAG. But those wins do matter. And so I would lean towards the BAFTA results more than SAG, but definitely would keep an eye out if there's massive speeches, last second momentum there. But yeah, I agree with you, Sophia. It does seem like on paper we're looking towards a one battle after another day, but there is potential, I think, for some other films to do well. I mean, if Sinners does well, to Josh's point, and does exceed expectations that we're all kind of assuming that it's not going to get to, if it wins, 4, 5, 6 awards there from its 13 nominations, that's a sign of strength for that film, which mostly a lot of people, including myself, have believed that it wasn't going to have that much success potentially in win categories. So if it won a bunch there, then you really can open yourself up to that race. But again, the PGA is going to, I think, be the ultimate decider in all of this when it comes down to it because of that preferential ballot.
Right now, I'm just going with evidence and trying to stay away from speculation.
Well, you would be a lot better than some people that write on the internet. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Evidence? Facts? Nah.
I take my job seriously, but also, if I started doing that, people, I absolutely not. You will not catch me doing that online.
There's still,
ever.
Sophia, you're like me. You're still like, yes, we've had this prediction for forever, but it's also like,
Look, I'm an Italian.
You don't want to
I'm
jinx
superstitious,
yourself.
so
exactly.
I need to stick. I need to stick with it. And,
Josh thinks we're nuts, but it's also like, you understand, Josh.
Yeah. No, I see who says some things online. Yeah, and I have my own thoughts too.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Who are they, Josh? Name names.
I think that will do it for today's show before we get into risky territory again, riskier than Wuthering Heights. So Wuthering Heights in theaters now. Go see it. Let us know what you think, and we'll be back with a BAFTA recap after those awards next weekend. Now let's go around and tell everyone where they can find you and all of your work. We'll start with Dan.
You can find me on Twitter at Dancin' Dan on film, and on Letterboxd and Blue Sky at Dancin' Dan. You can find my longer form writing right here at AwardsWatch and also at Next Best Picture.
And Josh?
You can find me on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd at JR Parham, and you can find my work at Next Best Picture and AwardsWatch.
Ryan?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Blue Sky at Ryan McQuade 77. You can find all my work here at awardswatch.com. If you like podcasts, we have the Director Watch podcast. We're wrapping up the Chantal Akerman movie series this week with A Couch in New York, which is a movie everybody has seen and has made just as much money at the box office as Wuthering Heights. Truly one of the greatest movies ever made.
In an alternate universe.
In opposite land. But Jay and I had a fun conversation about that. And you'll also be able to find out who our next movie series is going to be about. And that will release on Thursday, 5 stars on iTunes, Spotify, all that stuff. Sign up for the newsletter. Erik does it twice a week if he remembers.
And Erik?
You can find me wreaking havoc on Twitter at AwardsWatch Erik and at AwardsWatch everywhere else. It's a fun, exciting time right now. Lots of awards, lots of predictions, pretty much almost daily for the next month, because as we record this, the Oscars are exactly 1 month away.
Let's go.
Some call it fun and exciting. I call it dread-inducing. I am just a very nervous, anxious person around award season because I have been wronged so many times. I'm hoping this year is not one of those years. You can find me online talking about One Battle After Another, Wuthering Heights, Jacob Elordi, a number of things on Twitter at Sophia_Sim, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd at Sophia Sim. And you can find my other podcast, Oscar Wilde, wherever you listen to podcasts. We're in the middle of our contender series right now where we're going through each individual category. This week we have international animated and documentary feature and all 3 shorts categories, which will be very fun. And you can find my writing, interviews, reviews, including a review of Wuthering Heights at AwardsWatch. That'll do it for today's show. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time.